So, a few decades ago, Robert Anton Wilson wrote a book called Prometheus Rising, and it was trying to relay a similar message. He presented to the literary world this theory that there was both a thinker and a prover. Let me explain. Apparently, the thinker can think about just about anything and project that. How the world is flat, how the world is round, how the world is round but hollow at the core. Whatever the thinker can think, the prover will find some way of proving. And people spend their entire lives tangled up in these webs. Such has always been the basis of these professing authoritarian forms of knowledge. The epistemologist asks himself, well, how can we know anything? How can we know anything about reality for sure? How can I know what I know to be true? The Druids hold the theory that things are what they are because they are called what they are called. And we hold these semantics attached in our minds to words and labels. And this is actually what limits our experience. The mind does appear to conceive of some very basic universal archetypes, but we cannot even be certain of how these archetypes have come to be ingrained into our psyches. So they then and of themselves are also forms of conditioning and programming. Depression is a mental state that is usually the result of the mind not being at one-to-one with perceived reality. Usually the result over the uncertainty or the incongruence over one's own existence. Who am I? Where did I come from? Where am I going? These are all questions that seem to be intellectual faculties that we are capable of trying to determine in our minds the truth of these questions, and depression comes when we are disappointed that they are not answered adequately, or that the answers that we find do not meet that which we expected from within our unconsciousness. Depression can also be a warning that you're living under some condition or living under the programming of an inadequate or inaccurate answer as the basis for reality. So, now the prover is not just some objective scientist who will never know. A part of it exists within you. The prover is anyone who sets out on making something true through their experience of reality. The prover is the part of our mind that takes that realistic approach, sets down with the belief that something is what it is because it is what it is, and there's no real further argument or discussion on the matter. Just as many people have set out to prove to themselves that, for example, New Age metaphysical magic is valid and have succeeded for themselves, just as many people have set out to disprove it and have succeeded for themselves. It's then clear that somehow this reality as we perceive it is not always simultaneous for one person to the next. Depression, I was actually, before I started the current profession I do for my 9 to 5 to pay the bills so I can do things like this, the original academic pursuit of mine was psychology. And one of the things that really turned me off to it was that there's this feeling in our world that we need to treat depression with chemical solutions. And by doing so, we only cover up what actually needs to be dealt with. And we attribute it all to some correctable imbalance in the brain chemistry. Depression occurs increasingly with the techno-industrial societies because such societies do not provide for the emotional and spiritual, not simply religious, the emotional and spiritual needs of its people. I think that's one of the main reasons why this idea of neo-pagans or New Agers or whatnot has emerged, simply for the reason that these revival traditions allow us to celebrate life in a natural way, observing rites of passage that it seems modern society has long lost sight of or has completely misidentified. Becoming an adult now is whether or not you can drink or something. We've lost sight of a lot of our social and societal and cultural values. Birthing, childhood, coming of age, maturity, questing, vision quest, marriage, reproduction, elderhood, passing on. These are all ceremonially recognized by these revival traditions. And tribal cultures seem to have a much higher respect for their elderly, who is not seen like we see in our industrial, profit-driven society. That personalization, it splits people and separates. And for that matter, the roles and names and labels that we place on ourselves or allow others to place on us, attach to us like stickers. Hello, my name is librarian, or whatever. And what these stickers do is they cover up who we are. There are bits of flair, I guess, that cover up who we are. And the longer one identifies with these personas and projections, and you start to lose the essence of who we are, and the more onion layers that have to be peeled away later. Through a better understanding of that disassociation process and shedding labels and titles, you kind of gain what I guess would be termed antinomian enlightenment, which is kind of a Gnostic revelation. And to go back to a book we published in '99 called Crystalline Awakening, it's in Saddle print, but it was carried by Azure Green for a while. The first tenet is that this idea of enlightenment is really a word that it defines one's manner of understanding through gnosis, through personal revelation, as opposed to cognition, as opposed to what you're taught. The second tenet is this Gnosticism is then basically defined as the way of knowing through inspiration, revelation, intuition, self-honest personal experience that's unbidden through past experience. The third tenet being that the ideals and values of our modern society have inadequately aided us in the knowing and keeping of our true self. The fourth tenet, that Gnostic illumination requires a detachment from the outside world, that world which projects and labels and whatnot, as a means of knowing. And finally, that our world is a world of depersonalization, full of glamour and illusion.